Om Jananing Sharadang Deving Ramakrishnang Jagadgurum Padapadmitayo Sritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Today we have assembled to listen to a very interesting lecture by Swami Sarvapriyananda ji of Vedanta Society of New York. He is a minister in charge over there, the head of the center. He is quite young. This young sadhu of our order is very much in need among the devotees all over the world as a propounder of the Ramakrishna, Vivekananda and Sima literature. We are fortunate that he readily agreed to speak on this subject. Swami Vivekananda on Vedantic philosophy and praxis. Praxis means its application in day-to-day world, day-to-day life. I welcome him amongst us this evening. I welcome you all, the listeners, distant listeners. This is our custom to read out the brief life of the person in whose memory the lecture will be given. It is Satyajit Guha Niyogi Memorial Lecture. He was the beloved third son of late Vinayendra Kumar and late Anima Guha Niyogi. He was a chartered accountant by profession, worked for Andrew in Calcutta before joining Goodrich Group Limited. By sheer dint of merit and relentless hard work, he rose to the position of senior general manager in the company and retired as chief internal auditor of Goodrich Group Limited. Witty and humorous, he was well loved and respected by his colleagues in Andrew and Goodrich throughout his life. Satyajit, better known as Causal to his near and dear ones, was an exceptionally handsome person, courteous and gentlemanly, with a keen intelligence and an almost photographic memory. He was a storehouse of knowledge on various issues and used to often regale his family and close friends with a wealth of stories and anecdotes, recalling experiences of his childhood spent amidst nature in the tranquil Madhu tea estate in Jalpaiguri, North Bengal, where his late father was a very respected manager. An outstanding student in school, he always stood first in his class and won many prizes. He moved to Calcutta for further studies, staying at first Hindu hostel and then at Salvation Army Hostel, graduating in chemistry and then studying to become a chartered accountant. He was at heart shy and reticent in the company of strangers and acquaintances, and only opened up before his family and close friends. Remarkably, despite his long office hours that stretched far into the night, frequent and prolonged office tours to the picturesque tea gardens of Goodrich in North Bengal and Assam, and the frequent conferences and other parties he had to attend, Satyajit was intrinsically a family man, positive and exuberant. By nature, he was a connoisseur of good food and enjoyed spending time with his three beloved brothers, Dr. Sarvajit, Dr. Indranil, and Dr. Indrajit Guha Niyogi and their families. Married in 1984, Satyajit was a caring husband to Dr. Rolla Guha Niyogi and a doting father to his only child, Rini, and his son-in-law, Dipro Dotto. Satyajit was widely travelled. Invited by the chairman of Goodrich Group Limited, he visited with his family the head office of his company in London in 2005 and then travelled to Scotland and different countries of Europe. In October 2019, he journeyed to the USA, visiting the home of his nephew, Dr. Rajarshi Guha Niyogi and his family in Pittsburgh, and then travelled extensively to the east and west coasts of the US. Satyajit was a devotee of Ma Kali and often visited temples including Kalighat, Dakshineshwar, Belur, Tarapit and Kamakya. He was deeply moved by the spirituality of Rabindranath Tagore's songs and the lives of Sri Ramakrishna and Sarada Ma. He was an avid reader of the works of Swami Vivekananda and listened with intense concentration to the lectures of Swami Sarvapriyananda on YouTube, often discussing these animatedly with his family, especially to his wife, Rolla, Dr. Rolla. His sudden and untimely demise from acute myeloid leukemia on 10th August 2020 left his family, relatives and friends shocked and devastated. Today, on his first death anniversary, through Swami Sarvapriyanandaji's memorial lecture on Satyajit's well-loved Vedanta philosophy and works of Swami Vivekananda, we hope to humbly remember an exceptional and very beloved individual, praying for the peace and well-being of his soul. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchid Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharine. Namaskar. I offer my pranams to revered Swami Suparnanandaji Maharaj. I am most honored and privileged that he has asked me to deliver this memorial lecture in memory of Sri Guha Niyogi. The subject that I have chosen is Swami Vivekananda on Vedantic theory and praxis. Swamiji was intensely practical in all matters, and especially in spiritual life. He begins his first lecture on practical Vedanta by saying that the religion of Vedanta must be intensely practical, and we must be able to carry it out, practice it in every aspect of our lives. He goes on to say this fictitious difference that we have between spirituality, religion, and the life of this world. This fictitious difference must be erased because Vedanta teaches oneness. In this, that being practical in matters of spirituality, he is one with Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna also, for him, the niceties of doctrinal difference, the subtleties of metaphysics and epistemology did not matter except when they were of direct relevance to practical spiritual life. There is an interesting letter written by Swami Turiyanandaji to Swami Sarvanandaji. probably Swami Sarvapriyananda had asked this question, that what was the philosophy of Sri Ramakrishna? Was it Advaita Vedanta? Was it Vishishtadvaita Vedanta? Was it Dvaita Vedanta or something else? Tantra? Now, because when we read, for example, the Kathamrita or the Leela Prasanga, we find elements of a vast range of spiritual practices from within the fold of Hinduism and outside it, all of them in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. So what was his core philosophy? That was the question. Probably, we do not have the original letter of Swami Sarvapriyananda, but we have Swami Turiyanandaji's reply. In a most interesting letter, long discussion of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings from an Advaitic perspective, Vishishtadvaitic perspective, from a devotional, dualistic perspective. After a long discussion, Swami Turiyanandaji writes that if after all this, if you still press me for an answer, for a direct answer, you tell me briefly what is the philosophy of Sri Ramakrishna, then I will be forced to say, in Bengali he writes, Josho kore Bhagavan labh karo. In whatsoever manner, Josho kore, it's very difficult to translate into English, in whatsoever manner, by whatsoever means, realize God. That was the philosophy of Sri Ramakrishna, which means practical spirituality. And Swami Vivekananda also says that this fictitious difference that we have between spiritual life and the practical life of this world, this difference must be erased. And we see also why this is so. You know, the demands of practical life are so much. The time and the energy and the effort it takes to, do a job, to raise a family, to look after one's duties and obligations in society. So much time and energy is required by this, that there seems to be very little left over for spiritual life. That's why often devotees will complain that we do not get time for japa and dhyana, meditation. We do not get time. Where is the time for all this Vedantic study? Where is the time for sadhana? We have got so many other things to do in the world. Not only devotees. I remember we as young monks, as brahmacharis, we would sometimes feel there is so much work in the ashram. Whichever ashram we are in, a school or a hospital, whatever it is, there is so much work. We don't seem to have enough time for Vedantic study or meditation or our devotional practices. Of course, we were immature at that time. We are not aware of that it is not all that easy to devote 24 hours a day to meditation and prayer and study. But the question remains that if there are a lot of other activities which seem to be different from our spiritual life, then will spiritual life not suffer as a result of that? All this is because we make this understandable but fictitious difference between practical life and spiritual life. And Swami Vivekananda says this difference between theory and practice, this difference must be erased. It is only when we are able to spiritualize the whole of life, including what we think is secular life, so-called non-spiritual life, when we are able to spiritualize that part of our life, then only our spiritual practices become powerful, then they become effective. How does Advaita Vedanta bridge this gap between theory and practice? How is it possible to make the whole of our life spiritual? This is the question. Bhagavad Gita, we see that the Bhagavad Gita was not taught in an ashram. It was not taught to monks. It was taught by Sri Krishna, who was himself a warrior, a man of action. It was taught to Arjuna, the warrior prince. And it was taught in the middle of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in the worst possible activity in human life, that is fighting a war. In the midst of that, Sri Krishna taught spirituality, philosophy, meditation, devotion. So All of this he taught, which means that this is a philosophy that must be practical, that must be useful to a person in the midst of the so-called quote-unquote non-spiritual activities of the world. How is this possible? What is Vedanta, and how can we make it practical in our day-to-day life? And by our, I mean everybody, not just monks, not just scholars, but the student, the housewife, the corporate executive, the doctor and the teacher and the farmer and the shopkeeper. How can Vedanta be effective in our day-to-day life? How can it help us? So the core philosophy of Vedanta, Swami Vivekananda expressed it as having two aspects. One is the divinity of the individual, the divinity of the human being, and the second one is the oneness of all existence, the divinity of the human soul and the oneness of all existence. It starts with our inner divinity. In Swami Vivekananda's famous definition of religion, that the goal of human life, goal of religion and the goal of human life is to manifest the divinity already within us. So what is this divinity within us, and how do we discover it, and how do we manifest it? So Vedanta starts there. The Vedantic inquiry, though it talks about the oneness of the entire universe, but it starts with us, with the subject, with ourselves. You see, all our experience is of the structure of subject and object. Aham and idam. Idam means this, aham means I. And if you think about it, everything that we experience in life, religious and non-religious, good and bad, and personal and public, all of it is in the form of I and this. And Vedantic inquiry starts with the inquiry into the I. The inquiry is, what am I? Here also one must understand, because you see, our general idea of spirituality is that spirituality means belief in God and prayer and rituals, or it may mean some kind of meditation, mystical experience. All of those are true, but one must appreciate the unique nature of the Vedantic inquiry. Atma Vichara is a powerful, direct and unique spiritual practice. This is the primary spiritual practice of the Upanishads, of the Vedic path. The idea is this, that we are actually Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. We are not mortal, we are immortal, we are not material, we are spiritual, we are not unfulfilled and limited, we are limitless and ever fulfilled. And this seems to be so contrary to our ordinary experience of life. So Vedanta says that though it is a fact that we are Brahman, you are Brahman, but we do not know this fact. It is not apparent to us. This not knowing, this not being apparent, this is called ignorance or avidya. And Vedanta is that knowledge which overcomes the ignorance about our real nature. I think I am this limited being called Sarvapriyananda, but the truth about me is I am the limitless Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. And the gap between what I think about myself and what is the truth about myself, this gap is ignorance. And this is overcome by knowledge about my real self, which is Vedanta basically. And knowledge, if we are to gain knowledge, the direct way is inquiry. After all, what is the result of inquiry? The result of inquiry is knowledge. So we inquire about ourselves, who am I or what am I? And hopefully we will discover that I am Brahman, that I am that absolute reality. How do we do this? Vedanta, the Upanishads, and all the Vedantic texts which were written later on, they all give us a variety of ways of inquiry. Remember, now we are talking about inquiry as distinct from karma or action, bhakti or devotion, dhyana or meditation. Those are important spiritual practices, and in Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta, those practices are seen as preparatory. They prepare the mind for Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara being the highest and most direct and most powerful spiritual practice, but it requires preparation. So in the classical Advaitic format, in the paradigm, the Karma Yoga, the practice of selfless work, that prepares the mind, that purifies the mind, Atma Shuddhi or Chitta Shuddhi. And Upasana, meditation and devotion together, it concentrates the mind, Chitta Ekagrata. With this purified and concentrated mind, one can now effectively engage in Atma Vichara, in self-inquiry. What is the nature of this self-inquiry? And all of the Upanishads and the Vedantic texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Prakarana Granthas written by Adi Shankaracharya and the later Vedantic masters, they give us a variety of methods of inquiry. There is the well-known Drigdrishya Viveka. As I said, all our experiences are of the nature of I and this, aham and idam. I am the experiencer and this is the experienced. See, the idea in Vedanta is that it is a way of, to know the truth about ourselves, one must first step back a little from involvement in the world. Like, instead of going out into the street, if I sit near my window and look out into the street, I will see the flow of cars out there in the streets of New York, people walking past and vehicles and so on and so forth. So I've stepped back from the streets of New York. I'm sitting in my window and looking out there. And if I step further back and step into my mind and look at the goings on in the body, the sensations in the body, the activities of the eyes, of the ears, of all the various sense organs, all the sensations which are going on in the body, from the mind's perspective, I look upon them. Just like I see the vehicles and people passing outside my window, by stepping back and looking at them, similarly, I'm observing the mind. I'm observing the body and the senses through the mind. And the idea is, just as I am separate from all those people and the vehicles in the street outside, I am the observer, they are the observed. Similarly, I am the observer of this body and the sensory system here. I am not the body and the sensory system. Just as when I watch the vehicles go by on the street outside, I am not those vehicles. I am not those people. Similarly, I, the witness of the physical body and the sensory system, I, the mind, I am not the body and the sensory system. We can step further back. Vedanta says, step further back. And when you experience the mind itself, thoughts, feelings, emotions, understanding, not understanding, memories, desires, likes and dislikes, all of this crowd in my mind, they are passing, just like vehicles outside and people outside on the street. All these thoughts and feelings and ideas and memories are passing by in the mind, and I am the observer. So this I, the observer of the mind, and when I step back into that, that one is called Sakshi. Sakshi, literally Sakshi means witness. Now this witness consciousness, why am I calling it consciousness? Because whatever that observer is, it is definitely aware. Because if we are aware of the mind and through the mind of the body and through the body and mind, we are aware of the world outside. So our essential nature must be awareness. And this awareness, I am. So this is called the drashta. All change is in the world. Change is in the body. The body is born and grows and ages and decays and dies finally. Change is in the mind. But there is no change in consciousness. And there are subtle arguments to prove why there is no change in consciousness, because if there is a change, it is revealed to consciousness. If you say that there is a change in consciousness itself, either it will be revealed, either you will be able to know it or you will be unable to know it. If you are able to know it, if we're able to know the change in consciousness, then that change becomes an object to consciousness. So it's no longer consciousness which is changing, but it is something else whose change is observed by consciousness. One might say, no, let consciousness change, but it is an unknown change. We do not know it. If it is entirely unknown, entirely unknowable in principle, it cannot be revealed, then why even speak about it? If you open that particular door, then one can speak about anything. One can invent anything, X, Y, Z. So consciousness, pure consciousness, the witness consciousness, is beyond change. It is beyond any kind of limitation. So this limitless witness consciousness is our real nature, the Atman. Another way would be by the way of the Panchakosha Viveka. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, we find another process of Atma Vichara. Remember, we are all doing Atma Vichara here, self-inquiry. The Taittiriya Upanishad says that consider the physical body, which it calls the Annamaya. And am I the physical body? It starts with the physical body because our general feeling is, I am this body. Am I this body? Again, I am aware of this body. The body is something I'm aware of. As I'm aware of these glasses, and I am the one who's aware, and this is an object. Similarly, the body is also an object. This is a very, it's a simple fact, but it's something that is very astonishing to us. We think of the world as an object, as objects, but the body itself is as much an object as anything in the world. It is an object to all our senses. We can see the body, we can touch the body, we can even smell the body, we can taste, and we can hear the body also. The rumbling in your stomach if you are hungry, you can hear. So all five senses, they objectify the body. The body is an object, and I am that which is aware of the object. And then we go inwards. The Upanishad takes us step by step, inwards and subtler. What is the quest? What is the question we are trying to answer? What am I? The body is an object. I cannot be the body. I am that which is aware of the body. Similarly, the prana, the physiological processes in this body which keep it alive, the life processes, that also is observable. Our breathing, in breathing meditation, there is mindfulness meditation, which is so big in the United States now. The central practice is awareness of the breath. And with what Vedanta will say, oh, then the breath is something that you are aware of. Prana is something that you are aware of. So the prana, if you are aware of the prana, then the prana cannot be I. It cannot be the self. And then we go inwards and more subtle, the mind itself, thoughts, emotions, ideas, memories. So that mind itself is also observed. That the word we used for observing the mind is called introspection. We can all look into the mind, and we are aware of thoughts and feelings. So the mind is also an object, a subtle object. So you see how dramatic this inquiry is. We can generally think of the body as an object. I can say my body or this body, but we always tend to instinctively identify with the mind. But Vedanta says, by the same principle, take a look inside. You will find the mind is also an object. Thoughts and feelings and ideas and memories and desires, they're all objects. They're subtle objects, but they're all objects. And then the Upanishads, the Taittiriya Upanishad says, look further inward. The intellect, that faculty which we are using to understand. Right now we are using that to understand Vedanta. We're conducting Atma Vichar with the help of that intellect. That intellect also is an object. When we consider the intellect, when I understand something, I feel, I have understood it. When I cannot understand something, maybe I'm working hard at a mathematics problem in my student days, I'm confused, I feel that. So that's the intellect. And the intellect, understanding, not understanding, nischayatmika buddhi. The intellect is the determinative faculty. The functionings of the intellect are also observed. It's an object, a subtle object, sukshma, but still an object, not me, not I. Go further back, there is what we call the Anandamaya, the causal body, and that also is observed. For example, it is what gives rise to the experience of deep sleep. it's most evident in deep sleep. If you can even talk about anything being evident in deep sleep. But the point here is, the Upanishad says, look, you are not what you thought you were. What did we think we were? We were this system of 5 levels, the physical, the Annamaya, the physiological, the Pranamaya, the mental, the Manomaya, the intellect, the Vijnanamaya, and the causal, the Anandamaya. All of this, which is what we analyze ourselves into, we are not it. They are all objects, and that's why they're called sheets or coverings of the real self. Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, anandamaya kosha, pancha kosha vilakshanatma. Then what am I? I am that which is aware of these 5 sheets. I am that which lights up, which lends consciousness to these 5 sheets. And remember, Vedanta is not asking us to believe this. Vedanta is not asking us to accept it as a matter of faith. Vedanta says it's an obvious fact. Take a look. It's just that it's not evident to us because we have not inquired into it. As we inquire into it, right here, right now, each one of us, we will see it as, yes, this is the fact. I am not what I thought I was. This body-mind complex. This body-mind complex is also an object. I am the witness of that object. Being the witness, I must be consciousness. The same thing which Drigdrishya Viveka revealed, this Panchakosha Viveka also reveals that. Panchakosha Vilakshanatma. The Drashta Atma is the same thing as the Panchakosha Vilakshanatma, the Atma, the self, which is distinct from the 5 sheets. And then we also know the same result is arrived at in the Mandukya Upanishad, the famous method of the analysis of the 3 states: waking, Jagrat, dream, Swapna, and deep sleep, Sushupti. Avasthatraya Sakshi Atma, the consciousness which reveals the 3 states, the waker and the waker's world. Right now, I am the waker, and this is the waker's world which I'm experiencing. But then I fall asleep, and this world disappears, and this waking identity disappears, and there's a dream world, and I'm there as a Swapna Purusha, as a being in the dream, experiencing the world of the dream. And I know it's all false because I come back to the waking and I realize it was all imagined in the mind. I'd fallen asleep and it was imagined in the mind. And then there is a phase when the mind stops working, deep sleep. And that is also, in a sense, experienced. So the waking with the waker and the waker's world, the dreaming and the dreamer and the dreamer's world, and the deep sleep, for purposes of symmetry, we are saying deep sleeper and the deep sleeper's world. It's a potential, it's a merged state where the subject and the object are merged together. The distinction is not obvious there. But all of these, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, with the pairs of the subject and object, all of them are revealed to me, the witness consciousness. And this one is called the 4th, the Turiya. The Turiya of the Avasthatraya Vichara, the Panchakosha Vilakshana Atma of the Panchakosha Vichara, the Drashta of the Drigdrishya Viveka. Same thing, the same one consciousness, apart from the body-mind, distinct from the body-mind. This is the divinity within us. Swami Vivekananda calls this the divinity within us. In the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramityabhidhiyate etadyo vetti kshetragyam tam prahu tadvidaha. That this body is called the field, and that one which knows the field from within is called the knower of the field. And that, I don't want to go into the details, but it's basically the same thing which we are talking about. The Drashta of Drigdrishya Viveka, the Panchakosha Vilakshana Atma of the Panchakosha Viveka, the Turiya, the Avasthatraya Sakshi of the Avasthatraya Vichara, the same thing as this Kshetrajna. For purposes of Vedanta scholars, the Kshetrajna, the Vachyartha, or the direct meaning, is the Jiva, and the Lakshyartha is this Sakshi, pure consciousness. Now, at this point, a question might arise. that when we are talking about the witness consciousness, now it seems that I am the witness consciousness behind this body and mind. Sarvapriyananda body and Sarvapriyananda personality. I am not the body and the personality, but I am that consciousness which is shining through this body and personality. But then there are so many bodies with, I presume, with a mind, a personality in each one of them. Then is there, in all these billions of bodies, why only human, non-human also, in these billions of living bodies, is there a separate consciousness, witness consciousness, Sakshi? How many Atma? Are there billions of selves or only one consciousness? How many knowers of the field, Kshetragya? How many Sakshis? How many witnesses? One witness or many, many billions of witnesses? This is one question. And another question which might arise is, what about God? You're talking about religion and spirituality. You have not even mentioned God yet. Ishvara, Saguna Brahman, Bhagavan. Where? And Krishna, in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in the next verse, he answers both of these questions. Which are the two questions? How many Atmas are there? One or many? And what about God? Is God the field, Kshetra, or the knower of the field, Kshetragya? If the God is field, object, then God becomes a thing, an object, a knowable object. If God is the knower, Kshetragya, even more problematic, then I become God because I am the Kshetragya. But there is no third alternative because the entirety of experience has these two, subject and object. Aham, idam, Kshetragya and Kshetra. So where is God? On which side? This way or that way? And Sri Krishna says in the next verse, in half a verse, he answers both of these profound questions. He says, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. He says, know me alone to be the one consciousness, the knower of the field, in all these fields, in all these body minds, living, human and non-human, in all the body minds, behind all of them, there is one consciousness, one Kshetragya, and that I am, Krishna, Bhagavan Swayam. So answers to both the questions, how many Kshetragyas, how many consciousnesses, how many selves, how many witness Sakshi are there? One. Bodies are many, minds are many, consciousness is one. And that one consciousness, which is in association with all bodies, all minds, the consciousness behind this universe, that is God. So this is the Vedantic idea of God. And Swami Vivekananda says, this is the soul, the sum of all souls of this universe, that the one reality behind the entire, behind all beings. This is the only God that I believe in. This is the Vedantic idea of God. The one consciousness shining, revealing the entire universe associated with the macrocosm. The one consciousness associated with the individual being is the Atma. If it's not distinguished from body and mind, it is called Jivatma. And distinguished from the body and mind, it is called the Sakshi. And that Sakshi, associated with all bodies and minds, is God, Saguna Brahman. The Sakshi in itself, the limitless consciousness, is Brahman. When we will see how that happens. So this is one aspect, the consciousness behind all bodies and minds. And this is the divinity of the human soul, which Swami Vivekananda speaks about. This is one core, the foundational principle of Vedanta. And Swami Vivekananda said that my mission in life can be put in a few words. It is to preach unto humanity their inner divinity and how to make it manifest in every movement of life. This brings us to another implication of this idea of the divinity within us. When Swami Vivekananda says divinity within us, I think he does not just mean this one consciousness, Sakshi, and that's it. He also means the manifestation of this knowledge in every movement of life. He says, as an intensely practical disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he wants this spirituality to be manifest in life. He defined religion as the manifestation of the divinity within us. He said his mission in life is to not only show us the divinity within us, but also show us how to manifest it in every movement of life. He says Vedanta must be intensely practical. It must be applicable. It must be practical in every aspect of our lives. There was this paper I read about Buddhism, in which enlightenment, the bodhi of the Buddhists. So this was an academic paper, and they said enlightenment has two aspects. If you study the entire Buddhist literature, it has two aspects. One is, the name they gave in that paper was paradigm shift. Enlightenment as paradigm shift. And the second was enlightenment as ethical manifestation. What does it mean? In Vedantic terms, what it would mean is this. First, the paradigm shift. Our idea is that I am this limited being. I was born from such and such parents, and I'm growing older, and then I will die, and I have so many problems in life. So this is the idea I have about myself, and Vedanta says this is ignorance. If you do Atma Vichara, inquiry into the self, you will find that you are not the body and mind. You are not limited. You are not subject to birth and death. You are not subject to the vagaries of the mind also. You are the perfect, immortal witness consciousness of this body-mind system. So this is the paradigm shift. This is from avidya to vidya, from ignorance to knowledge, ajnana to jnana. But there is this other side of enlightenment, which Swami Vivekananda stresses, which might be called the ethical manifestation. Not only it's not enough to know Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham, I am of the nature of Shiva, I am pure consciousness, I am Ananda, but also one must be able to live it. This living, the Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, this expressing it in every aspect of our life, is not an entirely new idea. This is the idea of Jivan Mukti. In Advaita Vedanta, the goal was Jivan Mukti, to live free in the knowledge of one's spiritual reality, to manifest it. And it will be manifested as purity, as love, as selflessness, as overwhelming sympathy and concern and love for all beings, especially those who are suffering. So this manifestation of the divine qualities, this is called the ethical manifestation side. I think Swami Vivekananda's idea of the divinity within us, manifestation of the divinity within us, has these two sides. One is the knowledge, aham brahmasmi, chidananda rupa shivoham, I am Brahman, I am of the nature of Shiva, of the nature of bliss, of the nature of consciousness. And the other side, as that pure consciousness, with this body and mind, which is still appearing, as long as this body lives. Swami Vivekananda says in his poem, Song of the Sannyasin, heed no longer how body lives or dies, its task is done, let Maya float it down. But go thou and help people from Maya's veil. So you live, you're no longer concerned about your little bodily existence, but this is given as service, as an offering of love to suffering humanity, in service of humanity. So this manifestation of the divinity within, both are together. A paradigm shift, which is sort of epistemological, and the ethical manifestation. Together, the manifestation of the divinity within us. Then there is the next big step. Notice at this point also, when I say I am the witness consciousness, but that separates me, the witness consciousness, from body and mind and external universe. Even if I say there is one witness consciousness, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu, I am the knower of the field in all fields. But the knower of the field is different from the fields. Or is this so? This non-living universe, the vast macrocosm, is consciousness separate from the macrocosm. If you leave it at that, this is the Sankhyan idea of Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and matter. It is not non-duality. It's not yet Vedantic. So the Vedantic idea is, Swami Vivekananda said, oneness of all existence. Prakriti is merged back into consciousness. Prakriti is nothing but a manifestation of Maya, which is the power of consciousness. It is the Shakti of consciousness which manifests as the play of Prakriti. If you look at this universe, it is a play of the 5 elements of space and air and fire and water and earth, or in modern terminology, you can have quarks and superstrings and whatnot. So it's a play of matter and energy in the stage of space and time. But space, time, matter, energy, from a Vedantic perspective, they are nothing other than Maya, which is of 3 gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And this Maya has no existence apart from the underlying consciousness. It is the power of consciousness. It's not like Sankhya, where Prakriti and Purusha are autonomous but independent, ontologically independent entities. They have their own existence. Here, Maya, which is the root of all the cosmos, has no being of its own, no separate independent existence apart from Brahman, which is Satchidananda. So it is the power of Brahman. It is the play of Maya, and the play of Maya is nothing other than the play of consciousness, Chid Vilasa. This is the great Kashmira Shaiva system, where it says the entire universe is the play of Shiva. It is the dance of the Shakti of Shiva, and that Shakti has no existence apart from Shiva. Chid Vilasa, the play of consciousness. But then you inquire further, can consciousness play? If you are going to be a hard-headed non-dualist, we must be very philosophical, very rigorous, no matter how dry that is. Play seems to be very nice, but can consciousness play? Can consciousness act? Play means action and change. Consciousness does not play. Consciousness does not act or change. It shines, and that shining is not an action. It's the very nature of consciousness. So then this entirety of the play of Maya, the so-called play of consciousness, is an appearance in consciousness. This is the great doctrine of Jagat Mithyatva. The nature of this universe is an appearance in consciousness. Not Chid Vilasa, not the play of consciousness, but Chid Vivarta, the appearance of consciousness. The object is an appearance of the subject, in the subject. The universe appears to you, the consciousness, 1. In you, the consciousness, 2. As nothing apart from you, the consciousness, 3. So it is Chid Vivarta, appearance of consciousness. It is when the snake appears in the rope, in the classic Advaitic example, it is not that there is a snake separate from the rope. It is the rope alone which is appearing by mistake as a snake. It is the very nature of consciousness to appear as its own object, without at all being different, without at all changing. This is called Vivarta, the great doctrine of Vewartabada, which is unique to Advaita Vedanta. But this Vivarta, whatever is appearing in consciousness, every bit of it is pervaded by consciousness. When a snake appears in the snake in the rope by mistake, but that appearance of the snake, every bit of it is nothing but the rope, really. Similarly, this appearance of the universe, every bit of it is Brahman. Every bit of it is pure consciousness, is appearing in this way as its own object. So every bit of it is pervaded by consciousness. Not only Chid Vivarta, but Chinmaya, pervaded by consciousness. This entire universe is pervaded by consciousness. But even pervaded by consciousness, pervasion how? This room is there, it was in darkness, I switched on the light, light pervaded the room. The room is separate and the light is separate, but the light pervaded the room. The room can exist in darkness without the light. Is that form of pervasion? Is there a universe which is existing and then it is pervaded by consciousness? Or is it like water and the wave? There is no wave apart from water, clay and the pot. There is no pot apart from the clay. When I say water pervades the wave, I mean the wave is nothing but water. When I say clay pervades the pot, I mean that the pot is nothing but clay. Similarly, when I say Chinmaya, pervaded by consciousness, it means Chinmatra, consciousness only. So you see how we have moved from a material universe, Panchabhuta, 5 elements, matter and space, matter, energy, space and time. From there we move to Maya. From Maya we move to the underlying Brahman or Chaitanya. From there we move to Chidvilasa, the play of consciousness. And from there we move to Chid Vivarta, the appearance in consciousness. From there we move to Chinmaya, pervaded by consciousness. And finally we have Chinmatra, consciousness only. The entire universe is nothing but God. All this time, Swamiji says, we have been in God. We have eternally been experiencing God as God. The term God here means Brahman, Satchidananda. So this entire universe, which appears to be distinct from us, is actually nothing but our self-capitalist, real nature. This is the oneness of all existence. All beings are at the paramarthic level, at the absolute level, one uniform consciousness, appearing as this vast diversity. This is the oneness of all existence. So this is Vedanta according to Swami Vivekananda. The divinity of the human soul, by which, remember, it has two aspects: the paradigm shift, epistemological paradigm shift, that I am not body mind, I am Satchidananda, Aham Brahmasmi, and the ethical manifestation, that the qualities of love and purity and selflessness, all of that must manifest in our day-to-day life, fearlessness, and the oneness of all existence. Now, this oneness of all existence, Swamiji says, Vedanta must enter into every aspect of our life, because Vedanta teaches oneness. See, that is why the division between secular life and spiritual life is a fictitious difference. It may serve some purpose in order to give some special attention to spiritual life, but ultimately this difference must be given up. Work and worship are initially separate. This is my work life, that is my worship in the temple. Temple is different, office is different. Initially they are different, but at one point it must become work is worship. The spiritual feeling I have in the temple must be the spiritual feeling I have in the kitchen, in the school, and in the office, and in the hospital. The same divinity pervades everywhere. Then only the Advaita Vedanta reaches its culmination. One more aspect: because it is one reality, the goal is to reach this reality. All methods are welcome. The unique aspect of Vedanta is that it is all-inclusive. It does not condemn the other paths or the earlier stages. One big problem in spiritual life is, as we progress individually or at a civilizational level, when we come to some more philosophical idea, more refined idea of spiritual life, the tendency has been to condemn the earlier steps, that is ignorance, that is false, that is lower, or that is wrong, this is the only truth. Vedanta does not do that. Vedanta says those very ideas, those very practices were useful for us when we were progressing in spiritual life, and they are useful for so many people in the world. So they must also be supported. Just because we are practicing Atma Vichara does not mean you have to condemn or look down upon dualistic devotion. Very important for Vedantic Atma Vichara, and very useful and beneficial for millions of people who may not at all be interested in Vedantic Atma Vichara. But the beautiful idea in Vedanta is all those preliminary steps which we have seen in spiritual life, all of those are preserved and supported as true. Swami Vivekananda says that we do not move from falsity to truth. We move from lower truth to higher truth. We are moving from truth to truth. So often there is this tendency that because the Vedantic path is super rational, it is very subtle, but very intellectual. It has many advantages, many advantages, especially in this day and age of science and skepticism. There are very few paths in our traditional religions which can withstand the criticisms of modern materialism and materialistic reductionist theories in science. And Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, is one of them, one of those few. But there should not be any arrogance associated with it, that this alone is good and all those others are for inferior people, or those are false. No, Vedanta is inclusive, not only of the other methods, but of all other paths. Vedanta is open to the different spiritual traditions of the world. In every great religion of the world, there have been people who have attained to this non-dual realization, and all those paths are welcome and are acceptable to Vedanta. Swami Vivekananda says that this must be, this philosophy, this must be translated into life, into every aspect of life. And here, the idea which he got from his master, Sri Ramakrishna, Shiva Jnani Jiva Seva, this reaches its ultimate fruition. That in the knowledge that there is one divinity which indwells and which shines and which appears as this entire universe, what is my reaction to this presentation, this infinite, magnificent presentation of the highest reality which I experience as this universe? What should be my reaction? My reaction should be one of love and service. Love automatically, because love is an expression of oneness, and the expression of love is service. Love is not just emotion, not just feeling nice towards others, but reacting in service. So the same Advaitic realization is expressed as, serving suffering humanity, to give education to the illiterate or the ignorant, to give medical help in times of physical suffering, like in the world today, which is suffering from the pandemic. It's an Advaitic response, seva, to give food and material help to the poor and the hungry. This is not just social service. Behind all these activities is that ultimate realization of the divinity within us, and that the divinity is the one existence of this entire universe. I have run out of time, but this theme, let me just touch on one thing and then I'll bring it to a conclusion. The practical implications of this divinity within ourselves and the oneness of all existence, these are very wide. Swami Vivekananda sees the oneness of spirituality and science here. If we are talking about one reality, then the domains of spirituality and science are not different. Science is investigating this, spirituality is investigating. Why not just science? Why just science and spirituality? Art. Sister Nivedita, in her wonderful introduction to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, she says that our master, that is Swamiji, taught us that religion, art, and science are three ways of attaining that illumination, that enlightenment. But you need Advaita to see this. So Advaita shows you that not only by the traditional method of Atma Vichara, supported by meditation and devotion and service, but also by scientific inquiry, also by artistic endeavor, one can reach to that ultimate enlightenment. So these are very radical ideas, which Swami Vivekananda is sort of extending the work of classical Vedanta in this new age. It's also this idea of divinity within all beings and the oneness of all existence, which are very impersonal ideas, and therefore they form the basis of harmony. It's a very important teaching of Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, in fact, the harmony of religions, that all religions ultimately lead to the same goal. However they are expressed, they are talking about the same reality. Not just the harmony of religions, the harmony of secular endeavor and spiritual life, the harmony between the various schools of Vedanta, Dvaita, Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, the harmony between science and religion, the harmony between secular work in the world and spiritual practice. So this message of harmony is based on this insight of the oneness of all existence. So these are great themes, And maybe in future we will get time to discuss these ideas. We can see them being worked out across the world in this modern age today, in our civilization. I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. By their blessings, may we attain to this enlightenment and to this vision of the oneness of all existence in this very life. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.